lots of the liberal Westerners in my country have absolutely no appreciation for European history. They don't know what it means to live under Sharia laws.
You had to pay up to 10,000 children to serve in the Ottoman Empire's army.
So the replacement for not being able to pay the tax was you paid in your children's lives. So the Orthodox Church was very integral to Romanian society,
yes.
and was it pacifist? Was it telling Romanians, oh no, you shouldn't fight, or was it encouraging them to take up arms?
It was encouraging us to take up arms.
But the reason why I cannot come to ally myself with any kind of nationalist movement is because if it became in Romania's best interest and they were run by a nationalistic government, if it became in their best interest to betray another are an independent unit. We are our own group. My group is the church. Yeah.
I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Peace be with you. So, as an Orthodox Christian, just tell me again, what is it that brought you to the UK? Like, to this?
To this movement?
Yeah.
I just saw it on Facebook.
Okay. And where do you stand on all of this? Are you with the Antifascista or with the ethno-nationalists?
The Nationalists.
The Nationalists. Okay. As a Romanian, you and I both know that the Muslims invaded your country.
For 800 years.
Yes, and they kidnapped children.
Yes.
They raped women. They desecrated churches, and this is what it means to live under Sharia law.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, lots of the liberal Westerners in my country have absolutely no appreciation for European history. They don't know what it means to live under Sharia law. So if you know something about Romanian history, I'd just like you to talk a little bit more of how Romanians were treated under Sharia law during the Ottoman occupation of Romania.
The first documented attack.
Please speak up for the speakers.
The first documented attack of the Muslims was in the 11th century. Basically, they started controlling the free Romanian medieval states from the 14th century onwards up until the 19th century. We won our independence in 1878.
You're right, okay. There was a massive skip over. That's a good intro. Tell me what actually happened when the Muslims dominated Romania. What kind of things were happening inside Romania at that time?
Basically, whenever we couldn't mount an armed resistance against them, they used to take jizya, so that's basically tax.
A jizya tax?
Yes.
Yep.
That was about between 200,000 and 300,000 golden monetary
Yeah.
that they used.
And could Romanians afford to pay that?
Not all the time, but sometimes.
And what happened when you didn't pay the tax?
You had to pay up to 10,000 children to serve in the Ottoman Empire's army.
So the replacement for not being able to pay the tax was you paid in your children's lives. That's what it meant.
We didn't pay, basically they kidnapped them.
Yes, and yes, I'm aware of that. So they when you say they kidnapped them, how did they go about kidnapping them? Did they
basically
ride into the village?
Yeah, they had garrisons all around the Wallachian, Transylvanian and Moldavian countries. Those were the free medieval Romanian countries.
Yeah.
When the money didn't came to the Sultan, when we couldn't afford to pay, they basically sent the garrison out to the villages. They usually pick 10 children per village or 100, dependent on the population.
And then what happened to those children?
They served in the Ottoman Empire, oftentimes attacking European nations, including our own. That backfired for them quite a lot because when they attacked when we actually mounted an armed resistance, the children that served under the Ottoman Empire, they didn't forget where they came from, so they served as spies. So we managed to actually defeat them quite a lot.
Yeah, there's 2 points that I want to follow up there. The group that they were kidnapped and forced into, it was a slave army called the Janissaries, wasn't it?
Yes.
The Janissaries. And so what we have really is this scene where if you couldn't pay the jizya tax, The Muslim occupiers of Romania came and they kidnapped children. They then took them, and did they force them to become Muslims?
Yes.
And so they
tried.
forced them to become
They tried.
Muslims, to join a slave army called the Janissaries, and then sent those same children back to kill their mothers, their fathers, their
All other
uncles.
European nations, basically.
Yeah.
They invaded, not only us, they invaded Poland, they invaded Austria, they invaded Serbia, Bosnia, Greece, Albania. Albania used to be actually full of Christian people.
Yeah.
Now it's half Christian.
Well, you got
half
Skanderberg, haven't you? Skanderberg was a great Christian warrior who fought against
Yes.
Islamic occupation. He's an Albanian hero, and he was inspired by his faith to defend the church and to defend Europe. Now, let me ask you this question: that you've got your own hero in Romania.
Muslims. We have more than one.
Well, the most famous. We both know who we're talking about.
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, who
Tepes.
for most of us, we're more familiar with Vlad Tepes on the basis that Bram Stoker used Vlad Tepes as the basic caricature of the Dracula. And the Dracula actually comes from, because he belonged to the Order of the Dragon, didn't he?
Yeah, but basically Bram Stoker's novel is incorrect because
Rubbish, yeah. I know.
Vlad Tepes never was a medieval lord of Transylvania.
Yeah.
He had
Okay.
no business with
So
that.
tell us a
He was
little bit.
imprisoned.
Tell us a bit tell us a bit about the life of Vlad Tepes.
Well, Vlad Tepes was a hostage as a prince. Since
To whom?
To the Ottoman Empire. He was raised by the Ottomans since he was about 10 years old up until he took reign in 1456. He used that period as a hostage to learn their customs. You probably heard about the night attack against the Muslims.
No, I've not heard about that. But tell us a little bit more about Vlad Tepes. And yeah, he learned about the customs.
Their customs, their language, their military habits, how they did battle when they were on campaign.
Yeah.
Basically, he learned to speak Turkish very well. He also used that the knowledge of the Turkish language to set up a good spy ring to know when the Turks are going to attack his country.
So he was actually a great tactician, a great
Yes,
strategist.
he was.
And what inspired Vlad Tepes to fight against Ottoman occupation?
Basically, the land grabbing of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
They took about 2 provinces, including Dobruja, which
Yeah.
is Constanța, the seaside
Yeah.
part of Romania.
Yeah.
The western part of Romania, which borders Serbia, which we call Banat.
Yeah.
They took those 2 provinces. Vlad Tepes was keen on getting those provinces back.
Yeah.
Also the fact that he was a hostage and he was forced to attend the Muslim customs, all the prayers, all the
Yeah.
services.
So it wasn't an option. He was forced to do
Yes,
this.
he was forced to do that.
And in terms, he was quite a successful resistor, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
He defeated the Ottomans on many occasions. We know.
He's the first medieval ruler in Europe who conducted the night attack against the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
So basically, that time he had children already taken by the Ottoman Empire.
Vlad Tepes had children of his own that had been taken.
No.
Oh, okay, go on.
The Ottoman Empire took children,
Yeah.
not just Vlad Tepes, but also a lot of other children.
A lot of other.
They grew up. Basically, they were serving in the Ottoman Empire's
Yeah.
army.
Yeah.
When the Ottoman Empire attacked, he used those now grown-up children that were soldiers in the Janissary army. They supplied them with uniforms of the Ottoman Empire. He attacked the Ottoman Empire's camp where the military was. He attacked it with 1,000 cavalry,
Yeah.
all dressed in Turkish uniforms,
Yeah.
yelling, "The Romanians are attacking and they're dressed like us. Wake up!"
Yeah.
End of the morning, 40,000 Turks lay dead.
Yeah.
They killed each other.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question: What place did the Romanian Orthodox Church play in the struggle against Islamic occupation?
Whenever the Ottoman Empire occupied the Romanian countries, they destroyed the churches.
Yes, we know this.
Now, in order to have the churches preserved, they accepted the building of the churches in the Ottoman architecture. So basically, you have the round head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of just demolishing that and build a church that had a pointy roof, They just put a cross on top of the round head
Yeah.
church, the round the roof.
So did the Orthodox Church, do you know about what role the Orthodox Church played in inspiring people to resist?
They were basically community leaders, and whenever
Who were the community leaders?
the priests,
The priests
of the
and the
Orthodox,
bishops?
and we didn't have bishops, we had the
Okay.
priests and patriarchs, we were
Yeah.
different than the Catholic hierarchy.
Yeah.
So basically,
Just for those of you that don't know, a patriarch is equal to a bishop.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Carry on. So what was the role of this community
For
leadership?
instance, when the country was invaded by Muslims, the Orthodox priests used to take the villagers up in the forests into hiding. They used to take care of the community. They used to solve problems. They acted as judges oftentimes. They settled cases, stuff like that.
So the Orthodox Church was very integral to Romanian society, and was it pacifist? Was it telling Romanians, oh no, you shouldn't fight, or was it encouraging them to take up arms?
It was encouraging us to take up arms.
It was encouraging us to take up arms. So the Romanian Orthodox Church wasn't a pacifist organization.
No, we had plenty of priests who fought in the armies.
They fought.
Yes, actually fought.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah. And in terms of did the Romanian, you know, like in the West we had religious orders, like the Knights Templar,
Yes.
the Knights Hospitaller. Did the Eastern Orthodox Church have similar kind of chivalric orders, that Christian religious orders that combined?
Don't subscribe.
Combined. No, you didn't have that.
The Orthodox Church basically, when the countries were attacked, all Orthodox churches all across Romania, Greeks, Russians, they used to basically integrate in the national army.
Yeah.
So, national levy was taken up. Basically, you had a village, you had, let's say, 1,000 fighting men. They were taken up. The priest would lead them to the assembly.
So the Orthodox Church played a vital role in organizing the resistance. Okay. And in terms of the wider European culture, did wider European culture support the Romanians? Did they help the Romanians in any way?
No, not really.
No? So what about, well, I would wonder to correct you there, because I am confident that Eastern Orthodox Christians did rally around one another to support one another in this fight.
Very
Vlad
rarely.
Tepest sent the ears and the noses of Turks that he had killed. I can't remember whether he sent it to the Emperor of Austria or to the Pope in Rome as a way of saying, I'm a good and effective resistor, send me money, essentially.
To be honest, I don't know about that.
Well-
I know he sent them to the Sultan a lot of the times.
He did do that as well, but the truth is that Romanians and the whole of Eastern Europe did receive support from the wider Christian community in Europe. There were funds being sent to Skanderberg, there were funds being sent to Vlad Tepest by other Christian nations, other Christian kingdoms. And Romania gained its independence partly because Russia assisted, and Russia did so because of its Orthodox Christian faith.
No, I'm afraid that's incorrect.
No, you don't think that the Russians did?
We assisted the Russians in the 1878 conflict. The Russians started the war against the Ottoman Empire by themselves.
Yeah.
They were planning on breaching the front line in the Eastern Europe, basically in Romania and Bulgaria.
Yeah.
They failed to do that.
Yeah.
Then they asked for military assistance from Romanian King Karl.
Yeah.
That was the Hohenzollern dynasty.
But what I'm saying to you is that what happened was that the Russian Tsar invaded the Ottoman Empire, and he part of what inspired him, if you look into it, was that he wanted to liberate Christians under Islamic occupation.
No, he wanted the land.
No, he wanted to, well, part and parcel, yes, partly wanting the land, but also he was inspired by, the possibility of liberating Constantinople.
Continuation of Constantinople.
Yeah.
Once Constantinople fell, they said Orthodoxy is in Moscow. But the Orthodox Church is not united in such a fashion.
I know it's by nation.
Greeks,
you know. Yeah, it's by nation.
Greeks claim they have
But there are
continuous-
many occasions where Romanians, Greeks, Christian Albanians, Christians from Austria, Christians from Rome and Italy, the Roman Church, Russian Christians fought together. If you look into the history of it,
Basically,
the resistance.
Those are just revolts. What we're talking about. The two main countries, basically at the nation level, that actually support the struggle against the Ottoman Empire are Poland and Russia.
Yeah.
That's it. Basically,
And Austria. The Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Not so much. Basically,
Yes, they did.
they only intervene when they were attacked themselves.
The reality is that Christians in Eastern Europe were coalesced by their faith to stand with one another against the Ottoman occupation. And to ignore that means that you're ignoring a fundamental lesson of history, which is that resistance against Islamization and Islamist occupation is most effective when Christians put aside their nationalism
Obviously.
and unite with on their Christian faith.
Obviously. Only that didn't actually happen very often, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, yes, I think that's true, but it did happen.
Sometimes.
I would question you
the
to look
situation was
a bit
dire.
closer into how Romania gained its independence. Russia and Romania were fighting side by side.
They were fighting side by side, but
Why do you think they were? What was uniting them?
the conflict didn't start with Russia and Romania against the Ottoman Empire. The conflict started with Russia against Ottoman Empire.
Yes, and then the
That's it.
Romanians rose up.
We joined.
Yes.
the
So my
conflict
question to you is:
alongside.
if you're saying that the Russians were simply invading the land, why did the Romanians help the Russians?
Because they asked for our assistance.
Yeah, and why do you think that the Russians could ask for the Romanians' assistance? What was it that bound them together?
Basically, the Russians couldn't breach the front in Bulgaria,
Yeah.
the Danube front.
I would suggest to you that the reason why the Russians felt that they could speak to the Romanians was because they shared a common Christian identity.
Of course, that's clearly an attribute that made
Yeah.
this relationship happen. But the main goal of the Russian Empire was basically to attack the Ottoman Empire by themselves. When we asked to join the battle, because we did ask to join the battle because we were looking for our independence, they said, no, we got this, stay there. So when they saw they couldn't manage by themselves, they asked for our assistance, we assisted them. We managed to defeat the Ottoman Empire, but I believe the United Kingdom intervened. So they were actively trying to rescue the Ottoman Empire
Yeah.
throughout the 19th century.
And this I think is fundamental as to the reason why I reject nationalism. Because the reason why Constantinople is still occupied by Turks, Muslim Turks today, and the reason why it took so long for Christians to free themselves from occupation in the East is because in the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s, Western Europe had stopped being guided by a Christian identity and was now being guided by a national identity. And so the British and the French believed that it was in their national interest to come on the side of the Ottoman Empire. Whereas Christians, like myself, like Lloyd George, were arguing that we should have allied with the Christians. And by this point, Christians had become a minority voice. Nationalism, so my point that I'm making is that history teaches us that nationalism is counterproductive in any fight against Islamization.
I would argue you're wrong because, in my opinion, the British and the French Empire, for instance, they didn't have a national interest; they had an empire interest.
Imperial interest.
They didn't have the.
But they interpret their empire was part of their national interest, and they saw it as part of their national. No, the empire was the national interest, and so they saw their national interest as being to come against fellow Christians because they were being guided by nationalism. And this is the reason why I, as a Christian, and I'm opposed to Islamization. I'm opposed to Islam because Sharia law is intrinsically unjust. As we've just described what happened in Romania. It's intrinsically unjust. It's a bad idea. It's as bad as communism. But the reason why I cannot come to ally myself with any kind of nationalist movement is because if it became in Romania's best interest and they were run by a nationalistic government, if it became in their best interest to betray another Christian country, they'd do so.
Except that never happened.
It never happened. But what I'm saying to you, Britain had the opportunity to choose a Christian identity or a nationalist one, and because it was being guided by nationalism, it betrayed fellow Christians.
It's your opinion.
So nationalism failed the Eastern Europeans. Nationalism in the West failed Eastern Europeans. It wasn't until a bit later that the British and the French decided that it was in their national interest to help countries like Greece gain their independence. and then they fought the Turkish fleets to help the Greeks to gain their independence and to arm the Greeks. You know, so nationalism means that you blow in the wind left and right about whose side you're on. But Christian identity has one lesson. It says Christians are brothers, and you can't allow members of your own family to suffer without helping them. So as a Christian, we have to help other Christians, which means that as an Orthodox Christian, your fight isn't just for Romania, but it's for all the Christians in Ethiopia who are being persecuted. It's for all the Assyrian Christians, all the Christians in Eritrea, all the Christians in Iraq, all the Christians in Syria, all the Christians in Lebanon, all the Christians in Burma, all the Christians in China, all the Christians in North Korea. This is our fight as Christians is for the glory of the church, not the glory of a country. It's for the glory of the church, because by establishing that, by defending that, by giving our best to Mother Church and helping Mother Church in her struggles against her opponents, we make the world better. We make the church better, and the church lifts the nations where it has the firmest roots. You know? And this is where the struggle has to be fought. It has to be fought on solidarity as Christians, as a community, not as nationalists. Nationalists betrayed Romania. British nationalists betrayed Romania. And it's only when Christians unite that we have a chance to stop groups like Antifa, to stop, and this is where we might disagree, to stop ethnic nationalism, and to stop the injustice of Islamization as well. And I would put it to you, brother, I'm speaking to you now as a Christian to a Christian, that you need to root yourself in the Orthodox faith and stand in solidarity, first with other Orthodox Christians, and then with the wider Christian community globally. Because when we make Mother Church strong, the Church makes us strong. But when we allow Mother Church to be abused by liberals who have sold their offices to the state, as we find in this country, Mother Church makes us weak because we have allowed her to become weak. Romania will be strongest when it is most Orthodox.
It's always been Orthodox.
It has always been Orthodox, but it will be strongest when it is more Orthodox. When communism held Romania back, the Ottoman Empire suppressed the Romanian people. Yeah? So the only time that the Romanians have been most free is when they have been free to be Orthodox. You know? And that's my thought that I would leave you with, brother. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. What was interesting in that conversation was to try and highlight the fact that Christians have endured Islamist occupation before. If we look into European history, Christians in Eastern Europe were occupied by Muslim empires and Muslim armies for centuries, in which Christians were abused, they had their children kidnapped, they had their churches desecrated, they had their towns razed, their women raped, and all because they couldn't pay the jizya tax, you know? And yet we have a liberal establishment that is trying to tell us that this Sharia system, that within its own codices says that I as a Christian must be made a dhimmi and to pay the jizya, is somehow some harmless, benign force in society. It isn't. As Christians, we have to stand against every form of injustice, whether that's the racism of ethno-nationalists, the seeking to suppress free speech of the antifascista, or of those who are advocates of Sharia law. What we saw from our discussion with our Romanian brother is that there is a forgotten history within Europe about what it means to live under Islamic occupation. I would encourage you to look into what happened in Eastern Europe during the Ottoman Empire. Look at what happened to Christians in occupied Spain, and look what is happening and has happened to Christians in the Middle East today. As Christians, our first duty is to love all, but especially those in the house of faith. And the birthing of a Christian politics starts with solidarity with the persecuted Christian. And until Christians rediscover what it means to be politically Christian and uncouple ourselves from liberal politics, which is making Mother Church weak, and thus making ourselves weak, because we have bishops and archbishops who have sold their office to the illiberal establishment and become servants of national states rather than servants of the kingdom of God and of the people of God. And speaking from a Christian politics has to be based upon solidarity with other Christians. And then you begin to build a Christian society that's pro-family, that's pro-life, that's pro-God, basically.
I have one question before you.
Let me just finish, because this is a wrap-up and then we'll talk. One second, sir. One second, sir. Okay. Once again, we find that sir, let us finish this wrap-up and then I'll talk to you. We'll move away from him. We'll move away from him. I'll come back to you, sir. I'll come back to you. So, what we have is a situation where corporately we have lost our sense of our history, and we cannot defend ourselves or our sense of identity without first identifying ourselves with our Christian past. Because only through that common Christian identity can we begin to structure any kind of re-envisioning a civilization that is rooted in our own history, rather than this failed liberal experiment that has no history in European culture, no roots within the fertile earth of European civilization. This is what Christian politics means. It means Christian identity, Christian history, and Christian solidarity.